Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to tackle a really complex but fascinating theological idea about salvation. You've probably heard it called Calvinism. We're going to walk through how this framework sees the whole journey, from being called by God to being eternally secure. And believe it or not, this whole concept we're exploring really hinges on this one single powerful verse from the Bible. It lays out this sequence of actions by God, where one thing seems to lead, almost inevitably, to the next. And that verse gives us our key metaphor, an unbreakable golden chain. It's a great image, right? The idea is that if God himself forges every single link from the very beginning to the very end, well then that chain just can't fall apart. Okay, let's dive into this.
So that first link in the chain we just mentioned is God's call. But to really get what that means in a system, we have to understand that there are actually two different types of call.
This right here is a crucial distinction. First, you've got the general call. Think of this like a megaphone announcement. It's external. It goes out to everyone who hears the gospel message. But people can, and very often do, just ignore it. Then you have the effectual call. This is completely different. It's described as this internal, personal work of the Spirit that, in this view, is always, always successful.
So here's the point. This internal, effectual call is said to do something really profound. It's not just an invitation. It's an act that literally changes a person's nature, their very heart, making them willing and able to say yes to the gospel.
And you're probably already thinking it, right? This immediately brings up a huge question, one that theologians have debated for centuries. What on earth does this mean for human free will? I mean, if the call is always effective for a certain group of people, does that just wipe out any meaningful choice? Is it basically coercion? And here's where it gets super interesting. Theologians who hold this view often really dislike the popular term irresistible grace. They actually feel it paints the wrong picture, like it's a violation of someone's will. That's why they much prefer the term effectual calling. They think it better captures what's really going on. This gets to the absolute core of the argument. The idea is not coercion. It's not God dragging someone kicking and screaming. Instead, it's framed as liberation. God changes the heart so that it freely, and even joyfully, chooses what it was previously unable and unwilling to choose. The will isn't crushed, it's renewed. As this historical text from the Canons of Dort puts it, the will isn't treated like a block of wood or a stone. It's revived, it's healed, and it's redirected. It's an act of renewal, not force. So this idea of a renewed will, well, it leads to another, maybe even more surprising idea about the actual sequence of salvation, the order of operations, if you will. Now, in this framework, the order is absolutely critical. First, God acts. He gives someone a new birth. That's regeneration. And in this step, the person is totally passive, just like you're passive in your own physical birth. Then, and only then, comes conversion. Now that the person has been spiritually activated, they can actively respond in faith and repentance. A simple way to think of it is this. God flips the light switch in a pitch-black room. That's regeneration. Then, the person who can now suddenly see willingly and actively walks towards the light. That's conversion. The ability to act has to come first, as a gift. So if salvation starts entirely with God's action, that takes us right back to our golden chain and the final crucial question: can it ever be lost? The logic here is really consistent. If God is the one who predestined, called, and justified, then he's also going to be the one who glorifies. The doctrine of the perseverance of the saints argues that what God starts, God will absolutely finish. The chain holds. But here's the objection you always hear, and it's a really powerful one. We've all known people who seemed to be sincere believers for a while, but later they just walked away from it all. How does this system account for that? Well, the proposed explanation comes down to a key distinction: the idea that within any visible church, there are two kinds of members. You have the visible members, people on the roster, so to speak, and then you have the living members, the ones who are truly spiritually alive on the inside. And this verse from the Bible is often used to illustrate that exact point. From this perspective, the act of leaving isn't seen as proof that the chain broke. No, it's seen as proof that the person was never truly a link in that chain to begin with. So, to sum up this view, for those who are truly called and justified by God, Their final glorification isn't up for grabs. It's the guaranteed end of that unbreakable golden chain.
And that leaves us with a final thing to think about. Regardless of where you personally land on these ideas, this framework forces us to ask a really profound question. What does it mean if salvation depends not on our human effort, but entirely on God's mercy, from the very first link to the very last?